Hello and welcome to AFL.com.au. Fascinating round 3 of AFL football, and with me to talk all the news, the reviews and issues is Damien Barrett. Welcome to you, Damo.
G'day, Darcy. And there are a lot of issues today we need to thrash out.
Plenty to get through, Damo, and all of the focus on the Collingwood Football Club today and their 10-goal loss to Carlton the weekend. The fallout, Damo, has been significant. A war of words erupting between the Collingwood president, Eddie McGuire, and the former coach, Mick Malthouse. Now, Ed, after the game, referred to the crowd in one instance, suggesting that they needed to improve their behaviour. And he went on also to talk about their performance as being middle class in relation to the game plan. Mick Malthouse on 3AW on Sunday, in reference to that, suggested that Ed hadn't spent any time in match committee and maybe wasn't well placed to comment at all on that particular part of the game. And then I think what's inflamed this more was Mick individualising some of the performances from last year's grand final. Let's take a listen to Mick Malthouse yesterday on 3AW.
3 minutes, 5 minutes before half-time, we were 3 goals up. One blatant area here, backline play didn't take the ball over. A boundary umpire, I reckon, got it wrong. The Jolly punched the ball out, it hit the line, that's not out. They kicked 2 goals. They're within 1 goal of us. I can't help it that Dane Swan got 1 kick in the last quarter. I mean, that's, Dane Swan's a Brownlow medalist. He had 1 possession. And we were beaten by a fantastic football side. If that game plan is finished, it's finished. If it was no good, I'm sorry. We did our best.
Damo, unusual to talk about individual performances from a former coach. 1 possession from Dane Swan. He was the Brownlow medalist and clearly didn't get the job done in the last quarter. He also referred to Leon Davis and suggested that had Mick Malthouse still been coaching, Leon Davis would still be there. And the player who had a mistake defender in the last quarter was Chris Tarrant. Reasonably inflammatory things to say on the back of a grand final loss. Yeah,
but it wasn't just in isolation to what happened, I think, on the weekend, Darcy. This has been simmering now for some time, and we'll talk about it in the coming moments, but it goes back to 2009, when this deal was struck. That it was never, ever a happy deal on Mick Malthouse's behalf, and Eddie McGuire never totally got his head around it. And obviously when Mick said, as he did say just there, Eddie was always going to fire back.
And he did this morning, Damo. Triple M's Hot Breakfast. The Collingwood president, Eddie McGuire, had this to say.
But I am shattered today, shattered that he would turn on his men. He called them his boys, to single out Dane Swan. All right, he had a bad last quarter, but he had a good year to get us there. To go after Chris Tarrant, and then to say that he would have kept Leon Davis, which is a smack in the head to Jeff Walsh, who has done a magnificent job over the last few months saving and signing up the big name players. I was in the grand final room after the game. I may not have been in the match committee room, but I actually watched the footy. I'm just disappointed that for no particular reason today, he's given me a belt and I gave him unconditional support. He's belted Jeff Walsh. No one could support him any further. He just won't let up on Nathan Buckley. He supports Mark Neild in the paper today, but he goes after Nathan Buckley. He's a bloke who gave everything for Collingwood and for his coach as captain of our club. Gave everything. It's time to let go and move on.
Darcy, Eddie McGuire, now you were in the same studio when that was being said. I think before we talk about this, tell us what sort of state of mind he was in, because I think anyone who knows Eddie McGuire, he was always going to fire back. I think it was dumb what he said today, by the way. I think it's inflamed a situation that was never going to be kept totally in-house, but I think it's now brought it to levels that they don't now no longer have control over.
You also know Ed well enough to know that anything that is going to affect the Collingwood Football Club, he will fire back, and he's got an enormous amount of passion and fearless in wanting to protect. If he thinks that is going to destabilise the Collingwood Football Club and it's in the best interest to respond, he was always going to do that. I actually thought he was quite measured today. The byplay between Mick and Ed has been going on, and you know the history. I want to ask you about that very shortly, but I think the thing that really inflamed him was the individualisation from performances from the grand final, and talking about Dane Swan, Chris Tarrant and Leon Davis in that context, I think was the thing that he took exception to.
There's no one in this town who knows the way the footy media works better than Eddie McGuire, and I'm still surprised that he's bought into it in this way. I reckon he's actually put himself into the picture a bit here, Darcy, and I reckon he's made himself feel better about having a crack back at Mick. I think it could have been handled better.
How would you?
Let me go. Let me go. I mean, Mick is always going to do it, and I always respect Mick Malthouse what he says. I always do. And look, I agree with you. Perhaps a little bit too much individualising in some efforts in the grand final, but he's got a right to do it, Darcy. I mean, this is a guy who was basically cut from his absolute coaching prime. I mean, his last 2 seasons resulted in grand finals. Now, again, the deal was struck in 09, and let's go back to that deal. In 09, that was done at a time when Collingwood wasn't travelling well. But it was, the premise of that deal that McGuire struck was to keep Nathan Buckley. It wasn't actually to keep Mick Malthouse. It was to ensure Nathan Buckley stayed with Collingwood because North Melbourne had made a massive offer to him to be a coach. There were going to be offers from other clubs as well. That's what it was about, and that set the premise for what we're seeing play out now. Let
me play devil's advocate a little bit from the other point of view, Damo. There was a contract put in place in front of Mick and his management, which they accepted, an extra 2 years to coach, which took it out to a 12-year tenure as a very high-paid coach. And then there was a 3-year term at what we believe is exceptional money as well that Mick's walked away from. Sitting back impartial, can you suggest that it's a pretty reasonable package put in front of anyone who accepted it? It wasn't forced upon him. Why then the discontent? Why are we still hearing about this as we are now?
Oh, because Mick Malthouse was never going to be working at a footy club, Darcy, where he wasn't going to be allowed to be part of that footy subcommittee or that footy group. But as we know, it was going to be an honorary role.
Why do the deal then? In the first place?
I think the question has to be asked of Eddie McGuire. I think, look, he didn't make the absolute toughest of calls then. It was either get rid of Malthouse then and get Buckley in. He couldn't have his cake and eat it too, and this is why it's playing out now. And as I said, I think him buying into it the way he did today was, and I've said it before, I think it was dumb because Eddie knows the way the media works. This story is now beyond his control.
Well, it's gone to another level, Damien, with a tweet. That was Breakfast Radio this morning, Ed's response, and subsequently since then, you found this morning?
Yeah, this is Danielle Kearney, who is Danielle Malthouse. That's her married name there. I don't know how Eddie McGuire sleeps at night, #lies. It's been going all around Twitter today, Das, and Maddie Thompson of AFL.com.au spoken to Danielle, and she basically said that she knew this was going to turn into more of a story by tweeting as she did. She's been around long enough. I'm not going to answer any more questions, but after that conversation she had with Maddie Thompson, she's tweeted again. For the record, Collingwood Football Club is a fantastic club that is made up of some fabulous people, was just sick of hearing lies today. That's all with the hashtag there. That in itself is a very big part of this story. It just goes to show that the Malthouse family is not going to let this go. And while we are judging them and people are judging them, they have got their own view of what's happening and they are going to stick tight with it, and they've got their own media avenues now with Twitter, and Danielle actually manages part of Mick's business, and Mick's got his own media outlets. It's not going to go away, does.
Unbelievable scenario that is. Danielle also, I understand, is Mick's PA and runs all the Mick's affairs, so that's close to the family. I get the feeling we're going to continue to hear more about that. But I want to go back to the game. There's a 10-goal loss, and there's so many layers to this story, Damien. One, unfortunately, a tragic injury of Luke Ball, who's going to have a traditional knee reconstruction.
Yeah, he is. And we'll just recap the footage here, Das. First quarter, this is when he went down and gave every impression there, as the medical staff around him are doing it also, that he's done the knee. Now, we know he went off and came back on until this moment where he went sideways and the knee's totally buckled. In many respects, you are the perfect person to talk about this because you did an ACL yourself in 2005. Now, Collingwood, just for the record, is saying there was no link between that first incident we saw and the second. In your eyes, having done a knee, was there and could there have been?
Look, I think there could have been, and that's not to undermine the Collingwood medical staff because it's not my area of expertise by any stretch of the imagination, but the ACL is a really interesting experience to do because you get this sensation of pain that is a 10 out of 10 on the pain scale. To me, watching Luke Ball do it live, I went, that is a tragedy. He's done his knee, particularly as you'll see in the second part here, holding that back part of your knee, and where Doc Larkin's talking.
So what is that vision saying to you?
That is where this is the first instance, exactly the attachment where the knee is injured, and to me, it's a grab. That sort of pain level, my instinct was that 99 out of 100 times you've done an ACL rupture straight away. But when you come off the ground, after about 5 or 6 minutes, you're totally pain-free. The doctors have got a great ability to be able to assess that. And if there's any laxity in the knee, they're almost 100% being able to tell you've torn your ACL. There is no way the Collingwood doctors send Luke Ball out if they think he's done his ACL. It's a ridiculous thing to even suggest. But you go for a run on the sidelines. I did that in 2005 and I went, hey, you guys have got this wrong. This is fine. When you then turn sideways, the ACL is the ligament that keeps your lateral movement intact. Your whole leg collapses, and that's the thing that obviously stops you from playing. The second one looked to me to be more innocuous. Right. You know, he'd clearly done a serious injury to his knee in the first instance, and Peter Larkins was suggesting that on Saturday night. And again, that's not to contradict the AFL. The discussion that we can't help but separate, and I don't know where the link is that Ben Reid had injured his quad. He'd already been subbed out. Luke Ball is a warrior. Players want to do more than anything to try and get back out in the field. Are they being compromised, Damien, by the fact that a player has been subbed out for the game and the ramifications of that?
Yeah, well, we talk about pressure situations in footy, and everyone in football is under pressure situations, but the Collingwood medical staff at that time, pressure at number 10 out of 10, and they had to make a decision. Reid was already out of the game. Luke Ball, if he was telling them he's right to go, that's why it was made. But gee, I mean, it's they'd love their time over again, I would have thought, Collingwood.
No way they put him out there with any knowledge that his knee was
We're not saying that.
Under any circumstances.
But you've done a knee and you are saying there's a link between the incidents.
It felt very, very similar to a lot of people who've had that experience now. That is just one of a number of injuries with the Pies, Dane. We'll take a look at their injury list. There's Luke Ball, who's a massive loss. They lost Andrew Cracker in the pre-season. Brent McCaffrey, we understand, was absolutely set to be in their best 18.
Tarrant, as we know, has got the calf. Ben Reid, we're going to be missing for 3 or 4 weeks now, possibly longer with a quad. Now, the next two there, Travis Cloke and Darren Jolly, they could well both play this week. Cloke almost certainly will with the shoulder, but Jolly has watched this space one with the adductor. He got treatment for it after the game, and it is something they're monitoring. Didak, Johnson, Brown all played in the VFL last week, but I get the impression they're probably at least another 1 week away from being properly fit for AFL.
Horrific injury list. Could not be a worse start if you were Nathan Buckley and a new coach. And not being alarmist, we all like making big statements, but in round 3, it feels as though the road back to Collingwood to be the dominant side that they have been for the last 2 years. They won it in 2010, the most successful home and away season in their history last year. I'm sitting here now saying that road back is so hard and so long. Even the players that will come back, most of them don't get themselves right, Alan Didak, until halfway through the year because you haven't had that base of pre-season. Yeah. I can't see them making the grand final, winning the grand final as we sit here in round 3.
Yeah, I'm going to give them a few more weeks. I reckon in round 1 they were pretty good against Hawthorn when they had a lot against them as well. They did what they do in round 2 against Richmond, and I think Carlton, what they did to them on the weekend just gone, is going to do that to a lot of clubs this year. I wouldn't rule them out just yet, Darcy.
We could talk more Collingwood because there are debates that will continue on in regards to this, but I spent some time up on the Gold Coast on the weekend. It was an exciting game from a Suns point of view. I thought they played fantastically well and a bit more balance around that. Their young kids had a really good night, but one of their senior players caught my eye, Damien Barrett, and I think their coach, Bluey McKenna, will be ripping his hair out in clumps on the back of this. Look at the scoreline there. They're really pushing. That was Bluey's response to just a couple of moments in the game where one of their senior players, they've only got 6 of them. Yeah. You need them to make the right choices at the right time. This is the last quarter. Gold Coast are a goal down. That is not the time for party tricks 30 metres out from your own goal, and kick the goal and run away with the win.
No, you're right. And the scoreboard on both of those incidents just shown there just goes to show how much of an impact Jared Brennan had for his team in the wrong way. But look, I think fortunately for the Gold Coast, they showed for the first time this year some steel, didn't they? And one of the guys who actually helped them do that was a guy we'll have a look at now, Carmichael Hunt, who had his best game in the AFL by a long shot and delivered what is, in the traditional sense, a classical shirt front legally.
Loved it, Damo. I loved his presence. He had this steely look in his eye. They're playing him around the midfield, and he's just got this power and an ability to do that. And he actually had the Essendon midfielders half looking over their shoulder and thinking, where is the big unit from rugby league? And well done to him. Again, there's some hysterical comment around, has this been a disaster? He's played 19 games. Yeah. There was enough signs there to suggest that this is going to be a fantastic result, and he's a committed AFL player who's re-signed, which is great news.
It was. The Bombers got over the line, as we know, but they incurred some more injuries, and it's an issue right now for them because of the introduction of Dean Robinson, who the man who calls himself the Weapon. Now, he had these players built up to a point where they were so happy with what was going on 9 days ago. We look at this list now. There's 7 names on that list with soft tissue incidents that have all basically happened in the past 2 weeks. Now, there's a couple of names there we knew about before the weekend. McVeigh's the new one, Das. The calf could be a 4-weeker. Dempsey's still not too sure on his hamstring, and Jason Winderlich, as we know, is coming off a knee, but has also got a hamstring there. So it's an issue. Carlisle also with the calf will be tested, but the big picture is in play at Essendon, but it's going to impact on the small picture, and that is 2012 if that list keeps increasing.
Caught up with James Hird last week and asked him the question, have you potentially overcooked the group? And without saying that they had, he's wanted to push the boundaries and push the envelope without wanting to break anyone down. I think there's a feeling that they would rather test the envelope than not leave a little bit more in reserve. But that is a horrific injury.
I agree, but in a year where they could make the finals, impact like that on injuries to hit them.
I want to talk to you about your team, North Melbourne, Damo, with Hamish McIntosh shot after the siren going the other way. They could be 3-0 after 3 rounds. What a performance yesterday to clean up Geelong. They were fantastic.
Yeah, it was really good. I mean, North felt they were ready. They had the benefit of a bigger break than Geelong going into that game, Darcy, and they had to capitalise on things like that, and they did. It just gives them some confidence now to think that the 9th place finishes of the past 2 years could actually morph into a 6th, 7th, 8th place finish this year.
Exciting when you talk about Bastanak and Zeeble playing outstanding games and kicking goals as midfielders. Was a brilliant performance. You want to talk about Melbourne, their 3rd straight loss?
I just don't see any hope at all at the moment, Darcy, and I know that seems a bit drastic after round 3, but there's not one thing I think they've shown at any stage of the 3 matches they've played that makes anyone think this season's going to be anything but a disaster, and it's going to be a long season for them. The percentage is down to 50 or thereabouts already. They need something, and I just can't see where it's going to come from.
We've got the Bulldogs this week, which is a massive game for the Western Bulldogs as well, but you're leaning the other way and suggesting that Melbourne are in for more pain.
Oh, look, the Bulldogs, compared with what Melbourne has dished up this year, have actually been pretty consistent. Even though it's the same 0-3 scoreline, I just see a lot more hope for them as a club right now. Sickening
collision from the Adelaide Crows and the Hawthorn game. We'll take a look at Luke Bruce running back with the fight. The ball came out from Buddy Franklin, and young Brodie Martin off the interchange bench. Now, Bruce had no awareness at all, running back into open space, hasn't seen Martin come through.
Yep.
Horrific car crash style incident, Damo. I'm not sure there's anything we can do about it, but you hate seeing those ones.
No, look, the only thing you can do about it, Darcy, is just to get some awareness. I mean, as harsh as that sounds when you look at this again, and it's horrific to look at, but yeah, look, he obviously looked up at some stage and no one was there. You've just got to somehow know that you need to look again, I think, because you can't do anything about it, Darcy. There's nothing to be done about that. Coming off the bench like that will happen if you haven't got awareness.
A little one to leave you with here, Damo, and lesson to everyone out there. It is possible to drink too much blue Powerade. Poor old Joe Watson found out the hard way. Now, players consume up to 8 litres of the stuff before a game. You cop the little one in the solar plexus.
8 litres of Powerade.
That's how much you drink in a climate like the Gold Coast. Now, that was actually going live on the big screen there in the Gold Coast. 17,000 people groaned in unison. I'm not sure why I find that funny, Damon.
It is, though. It is.
Mainly because it didn't happen to me. Joe Watson.
Did you ever do that?
Fortunately not. But
not on a footy field anyway.
No, absolutely. Blue Powerade, you stay away. Any other colour but the blue. There's not much blue food around, is there? Hey, final quick word. Eddie, Mick, the Pies, your last take on what's been a pretty extraordinary moment.
It'll keep going, Darcy, because we'll now be talking to people like Tony Shaw and Peter Dacos, getting their takes on it. And Mick, as I said, he's not going to go away. He's got that many media gigs, and it's not in his nature to go away. And in all honesty, Darcy, I'm not exactly sure he's actually said too much. Now, I know it's a little bit borderline, but I still think Ed should have probably zipped it a little bit this morning.
Mick, a full-time operator in the media. We're going to hear more from him and more from that story. Thanks for your time, Damo. You're going to catch us every Monday. We're going to talk about the big issues in AFL. And on Friday, Lee Matthews and Damo again. It's afl.damo here at afl.com to talk about more football. But from us now, it's goodbye.